Hello everyone, I'm Caitlin Teeter, and on today's Teeter Tales, I'm going to be doing a review of the Wingfeather Saga by Andrew Peterson. So for this video, if you want to look at a specific part of what I say about this book series, such as the characters or the world building, I'm going to have chapters for this video and you can find them in the description. And so if you want to go to a specific part, you can go there. I will also not be giving any spoilers for the book series, or at least I'll be doing my best to avoid spoilers. So if you have any further questions because I don't address something in the video with the series, then go ahead and leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer your questions there. So, what is the Wingfeather Saga about? So, it's a little hard to explain what the series is about without going into spoilers for the first book, but the Wingfeather Saga is a middle grade fantasy series, again, written by Andrew Peterson, and it has 4 books, the first being On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness, the second being North or Be Eaten, the third being The Monster in the Hollows, and the fourth being The Warden and the Wolf King. The series is set in a fictional world called Are, and you follow this family, they're called the Igabys, who live with their mother and grandfather, and the kids are Janner, Tink, and Lily. So the kids, through the course of the first book, kind of start to get into some trouble unintentionally as they learn more about the people in their town, their own family, and the history of basically their world. Their world is kind of overrun by these creatures called the Fangs of Dang, who serve this figure called Nag the Nameless. I'll get into all those names and stuff later in the review. But the kids start learning secrets about those, and it kind of makes the Fangs of Dang really interested in catching them. But that's just a general description of the plot of the first book, because again, it's really hard to describe the full series plot without going into spoilers for the first book. So, now let's cover how the writing quality is for the series. The Wingfeather Saga is incredibly well written. It's really witty, but also can be very emotional, which is something I really appreciate about the series. Again, it's only second to Lord of the Rings for me for how much I enjoy it, but it can go from being really comical and have wordplay or even just really fun interactions with characters to making me cry. I have genuinely laughed multiple times with this series and also cried multiple times with this series. Peterson just does such a great job of conveying positive emotions and negative emotions in a way that they flow together well and makes the world feel more fleshed out. And part of that is also the story has a whimsical tone. It's not a dark, gritty fantasy or anything like that. I think one of the best examples of the humor that Andrew Peterson incorporates into his writing, and just kind of the wit of it, is actually found in the prologue. So I'm going to read you part of the prologue, which I'm a sucker for prologues, but I do genuinely think this is a fantastic prologue, and it hooked me right away. On Are, there were 2 main continents divided by one main ocean called the Dark Sea of Darkness. By the 4th epoch, the harsh land east of the sea had come to be known as Dang, and has little to do with this tale, except for the great evil that came to exist there and waged a great war on pretty much everybody. That evil was a nameless evil, an evil whose name was Nag the Nameless. He ruled from high atop the Kilridge Mountains in the Castle Throg, and of all the things Nag despised in Are, he most hated the High King Wingfeather of the Isle of Anira. For some reason no one could guess, Nag and his wretched hordes had marched westward and gobbled up the shining Isle of Anira, where fell the good king, his house, and his noble people. Unsatisfied, the nameless evil, named Nag, built a fleet that bore his monstrous army westward across the dark sea of darkness to the continent of Skree, and he ravaged that wide land 9 long years before our adventure begins. That's just one of the examples of the humor. As you can hear, there are lots of just kind of wordplay or other kind of poking fun almost at the writing conventions of fantasy that really, I think, makes the Wingfeather Saga stand out in terms of writing quality. has that sort of whimsy that I think a lot of more modern fantasies are missing. But it also has those hints of darkness in it. So you can have a fun little moment where you're learning about this cute little bookstore one moment, and then you're learning about these terrible creatures that have done terrible things the next, but it really just feels like Peterson is fleshing out the world rather than changes in the writing. Now, let's talk about the characters of the Wingfeather Saga. The characters are probably one of my favorite elements of the series. They are really likable, at least I think they're really likable, but they're also imperfect, so you're not getting these perfect kids who never do anything wrong, but you have these kids who have their own struggles and flaws, and they work through those, and you like them in the midst of those struggles. A good example is the main character, Janner. He is, I personally could relate to him because he's a bit of a bookworm. He really would just like to work at a library somewhere or just do something with books, but he has this pressure from his mom and grandfather to take care of his younger siblings. And so he has that tension, kind of this battle with selfishness, where he wants to do his own thing, but he also knows he has to be a good older brother. And watching him work through that and struggle with that and make mistakes is really, really interesting to read and really invests you in his character. And honestly, all the characters are like that. The main characters, side characters, even minor characters are really fleshed out in this series. My favorite character in the whole series, I recently went through the book series a second time, and I did not realize how little page time my favorite character had, just because he has such a wonderful story and arc throughout the series that in my head he was in the series a lot more just because of how fleshed out he was and how invested I was in his character. But the characters are just amazing. I'll leave it at that. And there are lots of wonderful characters. Now let's talk about the world building. Peterson, again, really knows how to take his world seriously but also have fun with it. He does a lot of world building in footnotes, which sounds odd, but they're honestly a really fantastic part of the first two books because they have fun with the world while also informing you about the world. In fact, I'll read you an example from the first book of one of these footnotes that kind of builds out the world, but also is really comical. Here is one of the footnotes. Thorn the Tor, the warrior king who built the palace at the beginning of the third epoch, was fond of kittens. On every spire of the palace Tor were statues of kittens in varied posture. From a bluff on the north bank of the Blap, it was plain that the palace itself was built to resemble a happy, crouching kitten. The uppermost spire was the tail, the portcullis resembled teeth, and the drawbridge was undeniably tongue-like. For ages the Tor dynasty nursed a disturbing fondness for all things kitten. Then came the Great War when Fangs captured King Olaman and the Tor and forced him to watch as the kitten statues were pulled down and shattered, one by one. When all the kitties in the kingdom were placed on a raft and set adrift on the river Blap, Olaman the Tor dropped dead with grief. To the citizens of Torborough, however, it was the one good thing the Fangs ever did. So it just has those moments that do genuinely build out the world, but also are very comical and just absurd. And so you have those fun moments with the world building, but then you have these really serious moments. There's this place called the Fork Factory in the second book that it sounds like it's going to be another comical thing, but then it actually is pretty horrific and is one of the more, I would say, oppressive, intentionally oppressive moments of the series, where Janner faces, I would say, one of his biggest challenges and really has to overcome some hard stuff. So, tying into that, Peterson does a great job of incorporating wonder and horror into this series. There are sea dragons in the series. That is not a spoiler. They're on the cover of the first book. And that really kind of embodies this mixture of wonder and horror that kind of permeates the Wingfeather Saga. The sea dragons initially are introduced as this wonderful, fantastic, kind of being within nature. They make beautiful music. People love to go and watch them. It's fun to watch them swim in the water. And you're really standing in awe with the characters at these descriptions. But then later, you start to see the darker side of the sea dragons and see how they can be dangerous, how they can pose their own threats to the world and the characters. And you realize they're not just a simple good or bad. And that complexity within the world and within the different elements of the world is really interesting to see play out. And I'll cover this more in the content part of my review, but there are some parts where the story does get quite dark. And again, I will go into that more in the content part of my review. But I would be failing in my review if I forgot to mention that Peterson, you can tell he had fun with this series because there are places and creatures and histories that are genuinely building out the world, but are also pretty hilarious. One of the most iconic creatures from this series is the toothy cow, which is what it sounds like it is. It is a carnivorous cow with big teeth. And it's just so funny to have creatures like that in the same world as magnificent sea dragons. You also have things called cave blats, not to be mistaken for regular bats, and other weird creatures. And it's just a lot of fun. So, for my overall recommendation, I would definitely give the Wingfeather Saga a 10 out of 10. Again, it is one of my favorite series of all time. The writing, the characters, everything is just so well done in this series. I would say it's really good for just an individual fun read. I love this series. Yeah, I've done it. I read it once in high school and I just went back and listened to the audiobooks, and I loved it just as much, if not more, the second time. It actually made me laugh and cry more the second time, ironically, even though I knew it was coming. I think it would also be great for reading to your kids or just giving to your kids to read. Um, I know some families who have let their younger kids read this and they really enjoyed it or read it to their kids, and it was a fun time for the whole family. Like I said, I listened to the audiobook, so if you're interested in that, I really enjoyed the audiobook. It's actually Peterson is the one who reads the audiobook, so it's cool to have the author reading it. My one note, or kind of two notes on that, is he does a good job of doing different voices for the characters and being dynamic, but sometimes his female character voices are not that great, which can be a little distracting. And it's very odd because Andrew Peterson is primarily a singer-songwriter, but he does not sing any of the songs that come up in the series. He just reads them flat, which was disappointing listening to that in the audiobook. But my overall thoughts on the Wingfeather Saga would be that this is an excellent fantasy series that has both humor and heart. So, yeah, that's honestly the best way I can sum it up. And a few more notes I would give on this is I have mostly the original printings of the Wingfeather Saga. So these first covers, I personally really like them. They look like an old book, and it looks like the illustrations I'm just really fond of, with the paw coming out of the picture, reaching and scratching the book. But they recently did a new edition of the Wingfeather Saga, and I think it's really the only one you can buy now, at least new. And the covers look like this. I'm intentionally covering part of the cover because the new covers tend to be really spoilery for the books. So they have a big spoiler on the covers of the new editions, and it spoils the book that you are reading. So if you get the new editions, I would recommend you avoid looking too closely at the cover until you have finished reading that book. And the one other note I would make is that you should not give up on this series after reading the first book. I will say the first book does a lot of world building and setup and character introduction, and things really start to pick up towards the end of the first book. And so it's definitely my least favorite in the series. This one I still enjoy because the writing is just so well done and so funny. But I would say give yourself more time to read this one and see if you like it, because the second book is where I really first got invested. I thought, the first one was okay, I'll give it a try with the second book and see if it picks up the pace, and it definitely does, and I think is much better from here on out. Now for the content or parent guide for what you can expect in the Wingfeather Saga, or for my more cautious viewers. I would say the Wingfeather Saga is good for most ages. It really doesn't have too much to worry about. There's a bit of bathroom humor sprinkled throughout, but there's never that much, and considering two of the main characters are boys who are like 12 and 11, it makes sense that a little bit would pop up. But the one other thing that I would mention is the series definitely matures with the main characters. So the first book is the most lighthearted and most lighthearted subject matter, whereas the last book is definitely the darkest. And I think that really speaks to the strengths of Peterson's writing, that he can mature his writing style along with the characters. But that does mean that the first book, honestly, I think just about any age is ready for this book. It does not have much to worry about. Even the violence, when fangs are killed or anything, they just turn to dust, so there's no gore or blood. But the later series definitely get some dark, violent, and disturbing moments. Like, book 3 will have things where it will say someone is shot full of arrows and there's a trail of blood they're leaving behind them. Things like that. And it's never too gory or graphic, but it definitely has those violent elements to it in the later books. I will also again mention that I cried with this series multiple times, so it could potentially hit some kids harder, depending on what they're ready to handle. And again, I'll mention there is some dark and disturbing stuff, a little bit in book 2, but then quite a bit in books 3 and 4, that even unsettles me as an adult. It's nothing that I don't think an older kid could handle, but I think it would probably give a younger child nightmares. Again, nothing graphic, but Peterson really knows how to pick a topic that's not graphic but can really unsettle you. But I think those would be my only content concerns that I would mention with the Wingfeather Saga. The characters are great role models. It teaches some really good lessons about sacrificing for those you love, doing the right thing, even has some more mature topics, but they're handled really well, like overcoming PTSD, things like that. That was my review of the Wingfeather Saga. I hope you enjoyed the review and found it helpful. If you have any questions about anything I said about the book series or want to discuss it because you read it, I would love to hear back from you. Another thing I would like to mention about the Wingfeather Saga is that they have actually recently made an animated series. They've completed seasons 1 and 2 and are planning to do the whole book series. You can find it for free on angelstudios.com. I just thought that was something that people might be interested in if you want to take a look at the show. It's not as good as the book, but it can give you an idea of what the book series is like, kind of. So, once again, I highly, highly recommend the Wingfeather Saga. This is a fantastic book series. Do yourself a favor and pick this one up, or at least give it a shot. But thank you for stopping by my channel, and I hope you enjoyed this review. Bye!